The views and opinions expressed in this video are for informational and educational purposes only. We aim to explore and discuss various perspectives and theories related to the events of September 11th, 2001, in a respectful and factual manner. This content is not intended to promote misinformation, conspiracy theories, or harm to any individual or group. We acknowledge the tragic nature of 9/11 and express our deepest condolences to all affected. Our intent is to foster understanding and dialogue while adhering to YouTube's community guidelines and policies. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome in to another episode of Latter-day Conspiracies, and we're bringing one for you today that has been around for 20 plus years. And it's a conspiracy that I didn't even know existed until a couple of years ago. I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Trevor Keys and my beautiful, gorgeous wife, Angie K. Baldwin, and we have an amazing guest for you. His name is Cash, and he has a presentation on 9/11 that he's going to be sharing with us that has never been shared before outside of just his friends and family, and he's now ready to share it with the world. Cash, welcome to the show. Welcome to Latter-day Conspiracies. We're excited to have you.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to be here. Excited for this one.
So, Trevor, Cash is your cousin. So what I want to do is just kind of have you really kind of introduce Cash, and maybe explain how we got to this moment that we've got Cash on here ready to blow the lid off 9/11.
All right. Well, first off, I got to say, Shane, how are you kidding when you say 2 years? You didn't know 9/11 conspiracy or heard anything until 2 years ago? Are you being actually sincere when you say that?
I thought Osama bin Laden, we went to war, George Bush is a good guy, until Angie's like, huh? And I'm like,
babe,
yeah.
no.
And then she started telling me things and showing me things, and I'm just like, oh, I had no idea. And I think there's a lot of other people like me that just have no idea. And so yeah, I'm one of those people that just thought, yeah, I mean, they ran, like, airplanes flew in there, and the things came crashing down, and
It was Osama bin Laden.
And it was Osama bin Laden, and we went to war, and yeah, that I thought that's the way it was. And then Angie started talking to me about stuff, and then I started going, okay, our government isn't what I thought it was.
Yeah, it was a big awakening for a lot of people. And I feel like, and I've heard this said a ton of other places, I feel like 9/11 for most people was their wake up, where they started asking that question, like, do I know my government? Is my government as honest and good as I think they are? Could they be doing shady stuff behind the scenes? Like, 9/11 is that. It was that for me. And for me, it was really early on. It was very early on. And the main reason is I have a brother-in-law who is an aerospace engineer. He's worked for Boeing. He's worked for ATK. They wrote a paper about him. The kid who saved Boeing came out of college and, just got this job with Boeing, saved the 787 Dreamliner. Smartest dude that you could ever meet. Like, nerdy upon details at all levels, right? And he immediately came out and he was like, that couldn't happen that way. The way that those buildings fell. And he's on these like chat forums with all of his engineer buddies, and they're finding all of these flaws and stories and videos. And it's kind of like the beginning days of Reddit, or Twitter now, where you see like the Trump assassination thing, new stuff. It was like that, guys, for years. For 3 or 4 years, people kept finding new stuff, and it kept coming out. And it was just like blowing your mind. And then you started looking at all these other conspiracies. Well, my brother-in-law, this guy who's this aerospace engineer, joins this group called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And in the beginning, it was like 100 engineers and architects. And then it was like 500, and then like 1,000. And I don't know what the number is now, but I believe, Cash, Google it as I'm talking. Architects, and I think it's like close to 10,000. These are architects and engineers who have put together papers and reports and gone through and run all of the analysis, both on the Twin Towers and on Tower 7. and they were like flaw. They putting out papers, done seminars on it, and it's wild. So that's kind of my experience in 9/11 and waking up to it in my family. I was exposed to it like early 2000s, and it broke my heart when I found out about it, um, and just made me start looking around the corner. So Cash is in on a family text feed of ours with me and this engineer brother-in-law and Cash and one other sister, Jacqueline. And all of our other family members who believe in conspiracies want to get into the group text. We don't let them in. We're like, we'll start another one if it makes you feel that bad. We'll start another one. And I've had a couple of my sisters talk to me. I'm like, but we're not letting you in this group. This is the cool kids only group. And anyways, Cash is in there, and he's a youngster. He's not my cousin. He's my nephew.
Okay.
And yeah, we're about 20 years apart. And Cash is like got genius level inside of him. That's a nice way of me saying he's like a mini genius. And he's really academic, really studious. He nerds out on all of like the crypto and the stocks, and he's got a channel on YouTube. His handle is Coach Cash. Is that on YouTube, Cash? I know it is on Twitter.
Yeah, it is.
So we'll put this in the bio. David put it in the bio, but he does YouTube and Twitter videos all the time on stock market. And the beginning of this year, he put a bunch of money, fake money, in an account, and he's been running it, doing puts and calls, and covering fun stuff like the GameStop short, covering what happened with the Trump assassination, with the all the money that was bet against Donald J. Trump and Rumble.
Right.
And you know about that, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, Cash is a fun account to follow. And as we started doing these Zion podcasts, we did the first conspiracy one with Angie. Cash immediately texted me. He's like, "Bro, I got to do a 9/11 conspiracy on Zion Media." And I'm like, "All right, dude, bet. Let's do it." So here we are. And Cash, I'm gonna toss it over to you.
But
Let you get going.
before we toss it to Cash, Angie, would you just give everybody your background on 9/11? Because listen, if you follow her on Instagram, and somebody at church today pulled her aside and is like, "I love everything you're posting." If you follow her on Instagram, she's posting about 9/11 stuff. So Angie, talk to us about your awakening to 9/11 and something being awry.
Well, for me, when it happened, I was on my mission. So there really wasn't a lot that for us. It was kind of like we were. So when I got home, I love to read. So it's really been the last few years for me that I just read. Here's the thing. This is why I started asking questions. When I'm learning about a subject and there are questions or discrepancies or that doesn't make sense over and over and over and over, then it makes me want to look into it more and say, there's something here that we need to look at. And I'm sure Cash is going to get into that when we talk about the day before 9/11, what happened. When we talk about, like we said, the buildings, how can they come down so easily? There's a building 7 hardly anyone knows about. That was, maybe we'll get into how it was reported that had fallen on a news station when it hadn't. I'm sure Cash is going to point out things, and I'll bring up whatever I remember. But there are too many inconsistencies for us to not ask questions. So that's
Tell
them. And when did you find out about it? Because you taught Shane about it. You basically baptized Shane. I consider it a convert, same as bringing someone into the church. If you can bring someone in and get them awake to start noticing the secret combinations, like as Latter-day Saints, how are we not conspiracy theorists after reading Ether, after reading the Book of Mormon and the Gadianton robbers and, all these people? Like, if you're not a conspiracy theorist, you're not taking your book seriously. Like, you're taking it trivially. And we had prophets that were. Ezra Taft Benson was the best. Absolutely amazing. And told us about it in conference and prophesied about it. And he told us to take our Book of Mormon seriously. So those of you who are watching this, pay attention to it and open up. If you're in that camp that Shane says that you've never heard about it, just listen to us. Put us on 2X. All right. So, Ange, I wanted to ask you when did it happen for you? For me, it was like early 2000s.
It had to be probably, I'm going to tell you, I don't remember. I think just over the last 10 years, I started to notice, the whole group of architects or engineers that came out. I noticed videos of people, firefighters, running out and saying that it's blowing up down in the lobby when the activity was up on top. I just started putting together more and more and more. It's probably but 10 years, but it's the last few years it's been more for me that I'm just like, there's too much to ignore. And even though it's difficult because this creates cognitive dissonance for a lot of us, it's hard to think that maybe there's more to a story than we've been told, especially one that is so that affects our country and got us into a 20-year war. So let's start cash and let's start going down, and we can start pointing out all of these things that made us start to question.
Awesome. I want to point out one thing before I kick it to Cash. COVID and all that happened with that is the single biggest waker-upper that there's been, far worse than 9/11.
I agree with
And
that.
there's so many people that have woken to this. So if you're listening to this message and you realize that your government lied to you, that your media lied to you, that the big establishments and all of that lied to you, take a listen to this and make your mind up if what we know about 9/11 is true.
Yeah, that's really well said. Asking questions, you don't have to go very far before you realize there's a lot of inconsistencies. And so I super agree with what you're saying, Angie. Just read a little bit. You don't have to go far. And like you said, COVID was a big awakening for me too. I remember, Trevor and then this other uncle of mine, brother-in-law of his that talks about all this stuff. They always were talking about these theories, and I just kind of, brushed it off and didn't think much of it. And then I had an experience during COVID where I watched a hashtag get shadow banned live on Twitter before Elon bought it. And I had one tab open with the hashtag and the other one had just disappeared. And I was like, what is happening? And I was losing my mind. I was like, I just watched this disappear like live. I watched it. And so then I texted Trevor and my uncle. And I said, all right, guys, like, what's up? Open the gate for me. Get me in here. What's going on? And then it went, the rabbit hole from there. And this theory, 9/11, I think the reason that I like hyper, just obsessed over this and just study, read, watch as much as I could, is because it is one of the biggest smoking guns. Aside from maybe the Kennedy assassination, up until this point, until 9/11, there wasn't a whole lot else that was this big of a smoking gun.
Mm-hmm.
So the title, gets us right into it. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, and that's the claim from a lot of people. So let's go to the first slide there. I guess that's me on that, huh? All right. That swap for you guys?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Cool. So the first slide here, I think in the theme of Zion media is secret combinations. So 2 Nephi 9:9 talks about, those who are under the control of Satan, of the enemy, their hearts will be stirred up unto secret combinations, murder of all manner, and secret works of darkness.
Hey, read this whole thing from the top, dude.
Yeah.
We got time. I want to hear.
Yeah. So it says, and our spirits must have become like unto him, and we become devils, angels to a devil, to be shut out from the presence of our God, and to remain with the father of lies and misery, like unto himself. Yea, to that being who beguiled our first parents, who transformeth himself nigh unto an angel of light, and stirreth up the children of men unto secret combinations of murder and all manner of secret works of darkness. And so this is saying, if it weren't for our Savior Jesus Christ, and we're under the captivity of the devil, this is what happens. So secret combinations are so real, right? The Book of Mormon talks about them. The Bible talks about them. There's other works of scripture, apocrypha, that talk about secret combinations. So,
hey, what's pretty? Something I want to point out on this, Shane? Did this jump out to you? Transformed himself nigh unto an angel of light. So there's part of secret combinations. They do ceremonies very similar to what we do in the temple for light, and they call messengers and they get messengers. And this right here is the first time I've ever recognized that for these secret combinations. These guys are getting beings from another dimension. Okay, transdimensional beings. They're beckoning them. They're giving them instruction, and they're forming secret combinations and plotting against our government, plotting against our churches, plotting against our economy. Just absolutely disgusting. But here it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and angels of light. I mean, it's really interesting because when you think of how the adversary works, he packages things like, I always thought the UN was good. I always thought these governmental organizations were good, so they package them to cause you to believe that they're good, like an angel of light would do. But deep down, when you start digging in, you find out they're not so good. But they come across as angels of light. So I think that is very, very interesting that you would bring that up. I also like that it's Second Nephi chapter 9, since September is the 9th month. I also think that's interesting.
Hey Shane, so how many times have you heard stories about angels of light coming to people and deceiving people with bad messages?
I've heard of it happening.
Yeah, I mean it happens all the time. I've heard
Yeah.
I bet you I've heard 20, 30 stories since we've started this podcast of things like that.
Yeah, totally. And by their fruits you shall know them. And then that's what we
That's
have to
right.
always remember. By their fruits you shall know them.
All right, Cash.
That's right.
Let's
Yeah.
roll.
So that I put that the bullet point there, the feelings of anger. So as I went down this rabbit hole, I just became more and more angry. Like, are you kidding me? And you have to balance as you go search through these theories, and you find out more about your government, and I'm guessing that it'll lead you to distrust them and distrust a lot of things that you consider just regular parts of your everyday life. It's easy to get angry, so the best way to balance it is with the scriptures and with the things of God. Otherwise, it's really easy to lose yourself in a lot of this, and then your psychosis goes, just like Alex Jones, right? But so we got to take a step back before we look at 9/11. Before we can get to that day, we have to step way back and take a look at a couple things that help set the groundwork for this. So the first one I want to talk about is Operation Northwoods. Operation Northwoods was, during the Kennedy administration. This was an actual operation that was planned by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And so Robert McNamara actually in the Department of Defense gave it to Lyman Lemnitzer and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and said, hey, get this to Kennedy. He needs to sign off on it. And essentially what it said, it was an excuse for the United States to enter the Cold War, to make the Cold War become hot and have military action inside of Cuba. And there was stuff going on in Cuba. The United States wanted to invade, intervene, but they didn't have a good excuse to. So they decided, hey, let's stage some terror attacks. And let's stage some terror attacks where we blow up some boats and a military base, and we make it look like some college students on a trip end up getting killed, but really it'll be some CIA operatives, and they were going to actually kill innocent United States citizens and create this act of terror. Totally, not actually happening, but they were going to make it seem like that's what was going on, and that Cuba was attacking so they could enter. So if you think, that the government
let's repeat that part really quick to make sure that people don't skip over that. The government, the CIA, and the head military gave a briefing to Kennedy and asked them to pull this off, and they agreed that we had to kill U.S. servicemen. It was in their writing. We were going to sacrifice some of our boys to pull this off so that we could help them do a coup eventually in Cuba and replace their government with what we wanted.
Yeah.
That's so disgusting. That is just blood on our hands. Okay. Ugh.
It's a mess. No, you're right. And this is, thank goodness for Kennedy, because this came all the way to his desk and he said, yeah, not happening. And then, he had some bones to pick with Lemnitzer and McNamara, and we all know what happened to Kennedy. So
yes, I read about this, Cash, and I know that there is also something that very similar with the Vietnam War and the Gulf of Tonkin.
Yep.
There's a lot that say that our government, it is shown, we look in the past, that they have had plans, or they have had plans that they do follow through with, that stage an event, in order to get into a war, to finish something that the government is wanting.
Yeah, and to just put that out there again, the Gulf of Tonkin that Angie is mentioning, the U.S. government, it was proven this has happened. This isn't conspiracy. You can Google this. We allowed and I think contributed into bombing our own vessel to get us to get into war, to the Vietnam War. That was what got America was like, no, we want to stay out of it. We want to stay out of it.
That's
War.
the thing that it got us in
Bombed
there.
our ship. They said it was the Vietnamese. They're gonna, they're at war with us. Congress gave them the green light. It was all over. We're in the Vietnam War, and 40,000, I think, servicemen died. And how many hundreds of thousands of people in
Civilians.
Vietnam? Ugh.
Just
Yeah, no,
awful.
it's a mess. We're fighting a losing war the whole time.
And like you said, Cash, you made an innuendo, but many people have written books on this. That this was one of the main reasons that people think got Kennedy killed.
Yeah.
And it was,
definitely.
remember that we've heard that it was Cuban, CIA, you've heard a bunch of stuff. We'll do a podcast on Kennedy.
We should.
But yeah, it was Cuba. So
yeah. The United States government, or actually take a step back, the United States average citizen lives paycheck to paycheck. The United States lives war to war. So you have to have an excuse for them to be at war. So in this, like Trevor said, this isn't conspiracy either. This actually happening. Go look it up. It's unclassified now. So that was then. And then there's a whole other host of events. But in 1997, just some odd things is that the World Trade Centers were pictured in crosshairs in the emergency response to terrorism pamphlet that was pushed out to FEMA, to the Air Force, to the Army, to the Navy. And it's just odd little things like that don't line up as you look into this. So still building up to the events that happened on 9/11. There's a couple other things that we need to talk about. So NASA in '84, and this is the picture of it here. They built and flew for like 16 hours a drone 737, and they were doing it for fuel testing and to test controlled impact and things like that. So they flew a 737 drone, remote control completely, for many hours to test it. And then in 1998, the Global Hawk, which we all know really well because of the war that came after 9/11, that was put into production and released. And then in 2000, there's another Department of Justice specific terrorism manual that depicted the World Trade Centers in crosshairs again. And also, prior to leading up to this,
just so I make sure I understand this, what you're telling me is the government was testing how to fly a airline jet via drone. They were practicing
the same model that was flown on September 11th that crashed into the Pentagon and the buildings. Yeah. So
yeah, the exact same model. Some kid can have an Xbox controller and do carte blanche with that. We've been able to do that since like 96.
Why do we
so
even
actually
have,
this was in
why
the
do
80s.
we even have pilots then? Like,
yeah, I was going to say it's earlier.
Drone flying and everything.
Cash, this was in the 80s.
Yeah, so the Boeing 737 was in the 80s by NASA, and then the Global Hawk released in 98.
What is the Global Hawk?
The Global Hawk, you can here, I'll pull up a picture of it really quick.
Is it a drone?
Yeah, you guys will recognize it really fast. You're like, oh, thing.
What do they use it for?
It's got a sweet camera on it. Let me share this tab. You see that? There's Global Hawk.
Yeah.
Go to one page. Go to one page. Like one image per page.
Okay. That a little bit better.
Okay.
So this is the Global Hawk for size comparison. This is how big it is. Someone loading it.
Oh, whoa, that is big.
Or being towed by a truck. So it's a pretty big drone. When I lived in Las Vegas, I'd have to drive out to Pahrump, Nevada, all the time to visit patients and to do different things. And I would pass Creech Air Force Base where they would have these. They fly these out of, and I'd see them on the runways all the time. So they can carry, strike ordinances, so missiles and bombs. They've got a really high-tech camera. A lot of times they'll do some of the spotting, and then they'll bring in other aircraft, to use the spotting data from the drone to fire missiles and things like that and run drone strikes. So when you hear about the drone strikes that Obama's run, the drone strikes in Yemen, things like that, a lot of times the Global Hawk's involved, and they've upgraded since then. But that's the day.
Hey,
so drones are very much.
Hey, let's give Obama some respect. He killed more people via drones than any president has ever killed. That boy was lethal. You gotta
Well,
love.
he
You
still
gotta
got
love
the
it,
Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
One of them.
He was
dude.
on the kill feed a lot.
Like he's got a belt. You know how they got all those boxing belts? Like Obama just has so many belts of all these people that he drone strike and killed. Like it's insane.
Oh man. So it gets crazier. And I've got the article here that you guys can see. I'm using. I didn't even realize I was using it, but I have been using the Wayback Machine. That Trevor told me about the Wayback Machine a few days ago, and I didn't realize I've already been using it. I thought it was a new discovery, and then I got in there and I was like, oh yeah, I know what this is. So you go use the Wayback Machine to find old articles and things that have been scrubbed. But NORAD and the Pentagon had been running drills that specifically mock drills where targets would hit the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and then they pulled the drill for the Pentagon because they said, it's too unrealistic.
That's not
So
true.
they were running drills of what happened.
Are you kidding me?
No, it's ridiculous. So
why would they even run a drill like that? Like,
you tell
that doesn't
me.
even make sense.
Yeah. No,
when did this happen?
The drills were run like 2 years before the attacks. So like 98, 99, 2000, they were running these drills. And NORAD confirmed it in a written statement. They're like, yeah, they were actually, let me back up. They were hijacking exercises, to be even more specific. So yeah. And so there's little things like this leading up to, before we can get to 9/11, that's like, okay, it starts to make you think.
Let's be honest. Like, if I was running the government and I had unlimited money, I would be running drills for all sorts of scenarios, cyber attacks, everything. So, I mean, let's put that out there.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, you have to look at things as true objectively, and it's easy to get ramped up and quick, like another one on this,
But that is so inflammatory.
Yeah, hijacking, hijacked plane that hits World Trade Center and then the Pentagon as well. So, then in 2001, they changed the policy for when a plane is hijacked. So, essentially, it had to go through a certain line, right up top brass, go up before they could say, "Hey, we can scramble jets." And that line that they was instituted in 2001, just a few months prior to that it had to go to the Secretary of Defense and then the Department of Defense and all this stuff. So the air traffic controllers had to run it up the line, and then it had to go up to the Aviation Association, whatever, and then it had to go to the Secretary of Defense, and then he had to approve it. And so by the time it finally got approved in 9/11, it had been 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes before the first F-16 was scrambled. And so
2 months before somebody goes in and is like, update to the following procedures, click accept, and they just change like how you flag for oh my gosh.
Yeah. And you go listen to or read through the comms, the radio comms of the air traffic controllers and their higher ups during that time, and there's so many red flags. It just doesn't make sense. They're saying like, hey, what are we going to do? And they're like, oh, everybody just left the room. I don't know what we're going to do. So
all right.
And then this is a caveat, and it's been confirmed in a few different places, or not a caveat, but it's just a little detail in a few different places that a lot of top brass were supposedly told not to fly or to fly private the weeks leading up to September 11th, which is interesting to note. Yeah. And I have an article also, I didn't put this in here, but there's also a claim that prior to, I'll go for it.
Sorry, I was going to say, if you tell us what it is, we can have David.
I have the link.
It up. We can have David put it up. Just talk about it, and then we can have David.
Yeah, so it's the Guardian. It's in the PowerPoint. You've got it. You can have him put it in there. But it's an article from the Guardian in 2001 that essentially it's claiming that Bin Laden was treated in a CIA hospital by American physicians and doctors for his kidneys. It was known that he had bad kidneys, probably going through some dialysis or something like that, and that he was seen at the American hospital in Dubai and treated there. Just weeks before 9/11. So all the claims that he was, hidden away in a cave somewhere and all that, it's a bunch of BS, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
And are we going to talk about what else happened about 2 months before with Alex Jones?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So yeah, Alex Jones, that's a huge thing. Why don't you touch on that, Angie? Go for it.
Okay. Well, we had a commentator. This man, Alex Jones, I know people have seen him when he's really trying to get a lot of words out, and he can look crazy. But about a month or two before 9/11, he's on his podcast saying that he's got information intel that they are going to fly planes into the World Trade Center and blame it on a guy named Osama bin Laden. At that point, he wasn't a household name for any of us. So he was saying, we got to call the White House. We got to try to stop this. Not only that, is that the Afghan commander at that time that was fighting against the Taliban, his last name was Mossad. He was warning us as well. And then he was killed 2 days before 9/11. So there were warnings that, and I mean, videos, you can see people talking about this before it even happened. So obviously there was talk about it, that the information was getting out, so that something like this was going to happen. But that is so specific to say flying planes into the World Trade Center. So that's one of the, maybe that might have been one of the first things that I thought.
And
I watched it after the fact.
And blaming it on a guy named Osama bin
Osama
Laden.
bin Laden, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that you can look right now.
Should I? I've got that video. Should I play it?
Sure.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, and I'll get these.
Stop sharing.
Well, hold on a second.
Okay.
I got to make sure I can be logged in here.
Okay. While you're pulling it up, and getting that going, it's interesting that if you go back to the comms of the air traffic controllers and you listen to what they're saying, and then you go back and read the 9/11 Commission report that was issued, years after. There's a ton of contradictions in that, and there's stuff that's scrubbed, and we'll get into some of that as well, based on what the air traffic controllers were saying, what they were hearing back from the Department of Defense. They couldn't find Secretary of Defense. Some people just were conveniently on vacation. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share my screen. Hopefully, I do this right.
What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning into this episode. Be sure to share this episode with your friends and your family on any platform, whether that be Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or however you send messages. Get it out to people. We have grown our channel in just 45 days to 3,000 subscribers, and our goal is to get to 30,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we need your help. So if you like our content, please do us a solid and share it with your neighbor.
Can you guys see this Alex Jones here?
Yeah, all right, July 25th, 2001.
Saying, call Washington. Tell them to call off the attack. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad that you could join us today for this Wednesday, July 25th, 2001 broadcast. Tyranny is enveloping the globe, and the United States is a shining jewel the globalists want to bring down. They will use terrorism as the pretext to get it done. So that's coming up in the second half of the show. Very important information. I'm going to put the call out. You call the White House and tell them, look, we've seen the news stories that you wanted to blow things up, that you have blown things up, and that you're saying 4 million of us are going to die. We need martial law, the Associated Press, and one of your little drills you have, and that we're aware of who the terrorists are if you pull this. This can stop the Shitlerian Reichstag event. I want to put the toll-free number up for Congress. And I won't want you to believe Alex Jones. I want you to go get these news stories off my website. I want you to call these major newspapers. I want you to find out if these statements were true by the White House about preparing for martial law. I want you to let them know that if there is any terrorism, we know who to blame. The point is, if any terrorism comes, it's from this government. And if there was an outside threat like a bin Laden, who was a known CIA asset in the 80s, running the Mujahideen War, whose family builds all the military bases over in Saudi Arabia right now, sits on the board of Iridium Satellite. He's the boogeyman they need in this Orwellian phony system. I want the White House numbers up there now. A big part of the solution, after you research all the government terrorism and check out what I'm saying is true, call the White House and tell them, we know the government's planning terrorism. We know Oklahoma City and World Trade Center was terrorism. We know that Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted to blow up airliners, Baltimore Sun. If you do it, we're going to blame you because we know who's up to it. Or if you let some terrorist group do it, like the World Trade Center, we know who to blame. And you could save the planet.
Yeah, that's a good video.
All right. When did it get to the end? How far did it get?
Yeah, I
It
could
almost
hear it
did.
till the end.
Then it
All
shut
right.
off. He was at the point saying he put a phone number up. He said, call the news stations,
Oh.
call the White House.
So
Tell
yeah, I
them
mean,
we
he
know that there's
basically
a plan.
said, we know there's a terrorist plan. We know they're going to blame it on a guy named Bin Laden, and he basically was awake to the fact that there was a secret combination. The government was going to do something naughty, right?
Yeah. I'm always curious, you know, where does Alex Jones get his information? You know, he has some great sources, the things that he calls out.
One thing about him, he says, is that over the last 30 years, he has studied the globalists, those that are behind the scenes that are making things happen in this world. So that's what he was saying in that video too, is that the globalists, when he says they, some people call them elites, some people call them a shadow government or deep state.
Yeah. There's a lot of names for him. And I think that's a perfect segue actually into this next part of, you know, leading up to 9/11, which is the monetary stuff, following the money. Trevor, will you throw the slide back up there for me? So prior to 9/11 happening, let's see, let me skip through here. I talk about the insurance policy. So prior to, you know, the attacks happening, there was an insurance policy that was taken out by this gentleman here. This is Larry A. Silverstein, and just, you know, 6 weeks prior to the attacks happening, he took out a $3.2 billion 99-year lease on the World Trade Center
Is this the
complex.
same guy that also took out an insurance policy on something recently?
The Bay Bridge, I don't know if that's true. Some people have said that he also owned that bridge that was hit by the cargo ship. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
That would need to
yeah,
be
I've
looked
heard that
into.
too.
Okay, I
Yeah,
haven't looked into that, but
can
yeah,
neither
keep
confirm nor deny.
yeah,
Cash,
keep
what?
going
How
with
much
this.
No,
did
you're
this?
fine. So he takes out this insurance policy, and you know, it's a $3.2 billion insurance policy, 9-year lease, and it specifically outlines acts of terror, like specifically for the World Trade Centers. And so then, after the events take place, he tries to claim that each attack, each trade center plus Building 7, were a separate attack, and so he tried to claim 3 times, and he ended up getting paid out like only 4 point something million. So he tried to claim like 7 point something billion. Sorry, that's with a B. Yeah. So then it's important to look at, you know, where you have to follow the money. What was going on? So the World Trade Centers, Tower 1 and 2, the North and South Tower, they had to be considered what was called Class A office space, right, to keep up. So they were built in the 70s, and because they were built in the 70s, there was a ton of asbestos that was around, throughout the entire building, like tons of asbestos. If you don't know anything about asbestos, I deal with my patients that I work with and people that I work with. They have super bad issues from asbestos that I run into all the time: cancers, blood issues, lung issues, skin issues, you name it, all because of asbestos. And the World Trade Centers were chock full of it because when they were built, it was the best fire retardant and insulator that was on the market, right? It only made sense. A lot of buildings were built with that. Now, it would cost more money when the calculations were run. It would cost more money for the asbestos to be removed and abated from the towers than it would to have done just a controlled demolition of the towers to completely just, you know, get rid of all the asbestos. But, you know, why would you do it? You can't do a controlled demolition, because if you do, then all of the surrounding areas get affected by all the asbestos that's in the office spaces, and you have to house all the current tenants. You know, but the cost benefit analysis there was that it would have, you know, been a better idea to just demo them because of the asbestos problem. And now, today, there are lawsuits being paid out, and you know, different acts and things for the firefighters and people who are affected to this day by asbestos. The jump in asbestos-related cancers and diseases in Manhattan is just astronomical, and the health effects because of 9/11 continue to skyrocket.
You're mute, Trev.
You're muted, Trevor.
I was saying I want to give a shout out to Jon Stewart, because I don't align with all his policies, but that dude has got those 9/11 people their money. He got them their money, and it's a shame that we've just like forgotten about him. It's like this moniker, never forget, and it's like, how about we don't send money to Ukraine and take care of these families?
Yeah. There's a lot of firefighters still dying, you know,
Suffering.
because of this. And I missed a point. And Angie, I think you had touched on this prior, also just weeks before, or was it 2 days before?
It's 2 days.
2 days, yeah. Donald Rumsfeld comes out and he says, hey, surprise, we can't account for $2.3 trillion worth of funds. They're just gone. We don't know where they went. We can't track them. Our systems are outdated, and it's being investigated. The offices that were housing the investigations for a lot of this and the dark pool projects and things, a lot of the accounting was housed in World Trade Center 7, where a bunch of also major SEC investigations into congressional trading were happening. And then also the areas of the Pentagon that were hit also were housing, the databases that were taking a look at all this, and the hard drives, mind you, on a lot of the computers that were, conducting these investigations were recovered. But until this day, the SEC has not disclosed what they found on them. So,
Very interesting.
Cash, we got that video to share really quick to drive in the truth of that. Here it is.
You got it?
Yeah, it's just 24 seconds long, and it's Rumsfeld announcing that we lost $2 trillion.
We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. We cannot share information from floor to floor in this building because it's stored on dozens of different technological systems that are inaccessible or incompatible.
Sure.
We are, as they...
Sure, dude.
He said that more than once. There's the clip of him on C-SPAN there. And there's a clip of him on C-SPAN, like out on the lawn too, of the Pentagon, saying the exact same thing.
Trillion.
Trillion.
That's how much we spent on all of COVID. All of that
Shane's
money,
face is just like disgust.
Every dollar that we spent on COVID was that much, and they just were like,
"Can't find it.
We don't know where we put it."
How do you not know where 2.3?
They do know. They funneled it into the military-industrial complex, and just haven't told us.
They know. They're just lying. This is the stuff that's starting to piss me off.
Yeah, like I said, feelings of anger. Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
It's a mess. No, so that's what was being housed. Then there was a lawsuit also in regards to the asbestos with the Port Authority in Manhattan, and that lawsuit was lost just months prior as well. And so that's it adds to the case of asbestos and having to abate it all. Then something that you cannot overlook is the market data, and like Trevor and Angie said in the beginning, it's a smoking gun with the attempted assassination with President Trump. Follow the money. You will always find an answer. And I love this one because I love the stock market. So in the weeks leading up to 9/11, right, 3 weeks out, put options, which is a bet that a stock will fall, right? The put options on United Airlines and American Airlines were 3 times the weekly average. Okay.
Wow.
Maybe that's nothing. Then 2 weeks leading up, put options were 6 to 8 times the weekly average. And then the week of 9/11, put options were, some markets reported 11 times the weekly average. Some markets reported as high as 50 times the weekly average that these put options were open. So somebody knew, right? You follow the money, someone knew, and you don't put that kind of, you don't place those kinds of orders unless you know. And probably there's not even enough liquidity for that order to get filled and that to happen.
Somebody? This sounds like some buddies.
Right?
Like a lot of people make
100%.
bets.
Well, and you had brought this up about Trump and the assassination, and there was a private equity fund. Angie, do you remember the name of that private equity fund that shorted True Social?
It's Austin Private Wealth LLC.
Austin Private, and come to find out, the Bushes are heavily involved in Austin Private Wealth, and they short Donald Trump's company stock just before the assassination attempt. Like, come on! At this point, we got to be looking at stuff going, okay, there are Gadianton robbers. It's evident. Now we just got to expose these people and somehow get them the hell out of power.
Yeah.
I don't know how we do that, but that's what needs to happen.
I know, but isn't it infuriating? That's some of my favorite stuff, that was following the money trail, because you can't cover that up. The market data is public. So you can, if you know how to look for it and what you're looking for, you can find it.
You got any numbers? You got any numbers to show us?
Do
you have a slide on any numbers?
For this one, no, I know all this stuff
Okay.
but you can go. So I'm gonna give a link to you guys to give to David to put in the bottom of this for probably one of the best documentaries that covers almost everything really well, and that's Loose Change. I know you know it really well, Trevor. You probably know it too, Angie.
Yep.
But Loose Change does a really good job of covering a lot of this, and they talk about the market data on this. Then the last thing, as far as following the money trail, is the 9/11 gold. A lot of people don't know about this, but the World Trade Centers were housing over $1 billion worth of gold bars and gold bullion, and they were housing it, because it's the World Trade Center. So there was foreign banks and foreign entities that were housing things there in these massive vaults in the base of the World Trade Center. And so part of the operations and the cleanup was get down to these vaults to get to the gold. Supposedly only so much of it was recovered, but the story goes that when they got down to recover the gold, they found an abandoned armored truck, right, with some vehicles, and abandoned convoy that had a ton of gold that was trying to escape through the tunnels underneath the towers. And the story goes they were trying to escape the collapse of the towers. Someone knew, and they were trying to get away with the gold. So that one's pretty interesting as well. Yeah, the 9/11.
That sure is interesting.
I heard that that the World Trade Center was a big fraud scheme for foreign investment, and there was a whole bunch of people that were told they had heavy metals in the World Trade Center in these things. They were selling like paper assets of hard metals, and all of a sudden, all the people are like, "Where's our hard money?" Like it just melted. And there were media stories where they said that it was just like lava of molten running underneath it.
Yes.
You've heard, and they have video.
We'll get into that. Yeah, I've got a lot on that. You can see the heat signatures from space. It's crazy.
Oh.
Yeah, and some like the geothermal radars.
There's another example of their money becoming slippery unto them.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I liked when you guys talked about that. The money becomes slippery. Yeah. So I want to run through the exercises prior to things going down, and what happened with the kind of the breakdown of the United States Air Force prior to this happening, and how they couldn't scramble jets at all. So I'm going to pull up a clip from Loose Change, actually, and I've got a timestamp on it, so we can go to the exact portion here. I want to show you guys, because they do a really good job of explaining what happened and where was the United States Air Force when all this happened. So I'm going to share this tab. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
All right, and should have audio. If not, just say something.
We can't hear audio.
The National Reconnaissance Office
we're good.
Virginia is preparing for an exercise in which a small corporate jet crashes into their building. NORAD is in the middle of a number of military exercises. The first, Vigilant Guardian, is described as an exercise that would pose an imaginary crisis to North American air defense outposts nationwide. The second, Northern Vigilance, moved fighter jets to Canada and Alaska to fight off an imaginary Russian fleet. 3 F-16s from Washington, D.C.'s National Guard at Andrews Air Force Base, 15 miles from the Pentagon, are flown 180 nautical miles away for a mission in North Carolina. This is 14 fighter jets to protect the contiguous United States.
Hi, Boston Center Team U. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need you guys we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, not a test.
Anyways, so
that's
go ahead.
They're like confused. They're like, is this real world or is this a test?
Yeah, exactly. They don't know what to expect, especially since all the tests are going on. So that's, NORAD, the Air Force bases, it's all going on. They can't get a hold of the Secretary of Defense to, scramble the jets, and it's just a mess. So with that,
planned chaos. Oh, and send our best fighter jets 150 miles away.
That sounds like October 7th in Israel, where you got parachuters that can go ahead and fly into Israel for Palestine, but you send like 1,000 missiles at the Iron Dome and they can't get through, but some guys on parachutes can get through. I mean, come on.
Over the most fortified wall there for 6 hours.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yep. All you can do is laugh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep it going. Keep it going. Let's
All
go.
right. So now we're here, right? We've made it all the way to 9/11. So let's start with the Pentagon. And the Pentagon is really interesting. There's a lot of controversy and a lot of, as far as the theories go surrounding 9/11, the Pentagon has the most disagreements between parties, and the reason is it's tough to see what actually hit the Pentagon. Was it a plane? Was it not? The damage structure or the damage to the structure is debated all the time, based upon the wingspans and, how far the damage went and all that. So I have spent kind of like how you guys had Jacob Hansen on. He's not a historian, but he does a good job of recounting what the historians do. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but I feel like I do a good job of recounting what they have studied because I have gone in. I watched, I'm not exaggerating, like a 700 plus slide PowerPoint on the destruction of 9/11 a few years ago, and I've rewatched it multiple times, and it's by David Chandler. And David Chandler, he is a physicist and he's an architect and a mathematician. And he breaks it down super, super well. And I've got the links too that I'll leave for you guys to put in there as well for his work. And he outlines it perfectly and shows that it was a plane. The problem and where a lot of the argument derives from is that all of the imaging was scrubbed. All the video footage was taken by the CIA and FBI. So there was cameras in a hotel that is adjacent to the Pentagon that would have captured it. There is a camera from a gas station also nearby that would have captured the Pentagon or the plane hitting the Pentagon. And then there's also a camera in the guard shack that
Parking lot
videos
area.
the cars. Yep, the parking lot areas and the guard shack right there as cars come into the parking lot. And only a few frames from the camera in the parking lot area, like Angie said, have been released. The others are all held. And I submitted a Freedom of Information Act myself to get the footage and was denied.
Wow.
So
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, man, dude. I cannot stress the rabbit hole I've gone down for 9/11. It's like, and everything I'm giving us is maybe a 30,000, 15,000 encircling. Like it goes so deep. There's so much to cover.
Yo, I gotta give you some respect for filing a FOIA request to get footage from the Pentagon.
I was
that's
pissed.
ballsy.
I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Hey, by the way, the second that they got that and processed it, somebody clicked enter on your request. It was like, Cash Craig, attach.
It's fine.
Bro,
if they wanted me gone, it would have happened already.
Now I'm worried. They're going to link Zion Media to you, and we're going to be on some extremist list, and we're going to be the first ones they pick up, bro. First ones. Hey, listen, CIA and all you guys that are listening, I'll flip on all my friends. So come make a deal with me. If you're going to round me up in a truck, I'm the guy to talk to.
Man, I have some stories for you guys later of Trevor scaring me as a little kid with the FBI and the CIA and making me just about pee my pants.
I believe it. Okay, so let's keep going.
Yeah.
Back to the Pentagon.
So back on this and keep going here. So there's a few things to look at though with the plane. One of the things that's interesting and why I lean towards the drone theory is that the flight path of the plane that hit the Pentagon they tried to recreate that. Multiple pilots, Air Force pilots, commercial airline pilots with the exact same plane in the simulator. It could not be done. Impossible for them to do. And air traffic controllers thought this was a military plane when it was coming in because of how quick it was moving and because of the maneuvers it was making. And then also there's a thing called maximum operating speed or maximum operating velocity for airliners. And many of the fighter pilots, who understand the aerodynamics of these planes and their limitations said that, if the plane is really doing what the black box shows and it was a Boeing 737, it would have stalled out. There's no way it could have maintained those G-forces. The metal would have been ripping off of it. It just is not possible. But then the flight path is tracked by the light poles. So there's multiple light poles that get hit. And for the plane not to crash immediately after hitting the light poles is really interesting because in 2004, there was a private jet going actually to pick up one of the bushes that clipped a light pole just on one wing. It ripped the whole wing off and it crashed before it could make it to the airport.
I saw that.
So hitting a light pole at that speed, it's going to cause some serious damage to these planes. And then you have, if you watch the footage of the people on the lawn who they're interviewing, they knew exactly what airline the plane was from, and they knew what kind of airline it was, and they give all these details that hadn't even been released to the public yet. But suddenly they're saying, "Oh yeah, I looked out my window and I saw an American Airlines jet and this number." And so you can go look at those claims and watch through Loose Change. It covers all that. Then to continue with the smoking gun of the plane of the Pentagon, and was it actually a Boeing 737? or was it a modified Boeing 737? The engine fuselages that are recovered, right? It's a Rolls-Royce RB211. It's made of titanium that it would not melt at the temperature that jet fuel can burn. And they find a single turbojet is all they find, is what they say. And the diffuser case that is in the pictures of that turbojet does not match the actual blueprints or schematics for that turbojet that is on, or the jet that is on that model of 737. So what they recovered and what the picture is does not match what the Rolls-Royce RB211 looks like. And this was even brought to engineers at Rolls-Royce, and they said that does not look like our engine at all.
Interesting.
So that's really interesting. And somehow, the plane vaporized, and they can only recover a few things, but they were able to identify almost all the bodies in the wreckage. And the lab that did that is the same lab that identified everything in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Right. So, yeah.
I remember watching videos soon after, right when this was happening at the Pentagon, and I remember thinking, I don't see I thought that I would see plane parts, and I didn't, and it was weird, and I thought, this is just strange. It just was. I remember a marker that was just strange to me.
Yeah, no, it's odd. And so back on, taking one step back on that David Chandler stuff, I really encourage, if you want to get into this and want to research and say, okay, what's the leading theory? What makes the most sense? Go watch his stuff. And he has a whole portion section on, it's called Seeing the Plane. And it is a plane. I'm fully convinced that it was a plane that hit it. I'm not convinced that it was that flight.
That huge Boeing is what.
Yeah, exactly. Or even if it was, it had to have been modified. There's no way that a non-modified Boeing could have created that. So let's jump to the Twin Towers, right, which is the most I guess landmark portion of the day that everyone remembers. And you think of 9/11, you think of the Twin Towers falling. So a couple of facts we're going to run through. Yeah.
How old were you in 2001, 9/11, 2001?
Let's see. I was born in 97. So.
Okay. So you were just like 4 years old.
4 or 5 years old. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And I remember like vaguely, I have one little memory of it being on the news at my parents' house and everybody standing around like, whoa, what's going on? But anyways, so the Twin Towers, taking a look at them, you have to remember the Twin Towers are made out of steel reinforced concrete, right? It's box columns. There's hundreds of elevators total in all the towers. And it was built in the 70s, state of the art at the time. And it was built to withstand, quoting some of the lead engineers, a plane hitting it. And in fact, in 1975, there was a fire between the 9th and the 14th floors. So way further down in the World Trade Center that burned for hours. And they didn't even have sprinkler systems in at that time. After those fires is when they were like, hey, well, you guys, you know what? You should probably put sprinkler systems in the World Trade Centers. And they did that. So between 5 floors, it burned for hours and hours, didn't fall. And this list here, I want to run through this, is all of the list of buildings that prior to the World Trade Centers falling had caught fire, burned for hours and hours, and did not collapse. So the World Trade Center North and South Towers were the first buildings in history for being a skyscraper of steel reinforced concrete to collapse because of fire. And they burned for 56 and 103 minutes respectively.
Yep.
It's also interesting to note that the tower that was hit second collapsed first, which is really interesting. So it had been hit for less time, burning less, and wasn't hit head on. It was hit through the side and it collapsed first. There's a problem with the jet fuel theory, that the jet fuel could have ignited the fires and continued to create fuel for the steel to burn. First off, in the videos, you can see a lot of the jet fuel explodes and burns up on impact. Then there's also analysis of the jet fuel. They said, hey, it went down the elevator shaft, and that's what weakened everything. And you look at how many gallons of jet fuel one of these planes carries, and it also would have burned up, before it even reached the bottom of the towers. And the tower elevator shafts were also airtight. So, there's another problem with that one there. So all these buildings burned. In 45, a bomber hits the Empire State Building because it's cloudy. It burns, doesn't fall down. In Los Angeles, 66th floor tower skyscraper burns for 4 hours, does not collapse. In 1991 in Philadelphia, there's a 38 floor skyscraper that burns for 19 hours, does not collapse. In Venezuela, a 56-story tower burned for 17 hours across 26 floors, did not collapse. And then in Madrid, there was a fire on a skyscraper that burned for 24 hours, and the top 10 floors were completely eradicated because of the fire. only those floors fell, essentially melted. Well, they didn't melt; they just fell, and the building did not collapse. So it's really interesting.
It burnt for a solid day.
Oh yeah, whole day.
Completely obliterated all of those floors, and these towers fell in less than an hour each.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. So
I didn't know that.
you know, and it gets better as we continue to look at this. So those facts, right? After it happens, you have this insane amount of conflicting evidence from major individuals who are involved in major ways in the construction of the World Trade Center and the maintenance of the World Trade Center. So you have Vice President of Mining and Technology at the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. You have the construction managers of the World Trade Centers, engineers. You have people from Underwriters Labs and others who their statements came out in the beginning and said, hey, that looks like controlled demolition, or that looks like something's not right. And then 10 days later, after the official story had been released, they said, oh, certainly the buildings collapsed because of fires. You know, that's what it had to be. It had to have been the fires that made them structurally unsound, and they collapsed. And, you know, they walked themselves back. They walked back their opinions. Then you have comms from the firefighters. And these are sad comms. If you go and listen to the comms, the radio comms that were released, mind you, not released for many years after, and they had to be, you know, Freedom of Information Acts had to be placed for the full release of these. And there's reasons, I believe, why the comms were not released, and we'll get to that. But there's a guy, his name's Chief Palmer,
Hey,
and he made it to the
on
78th
this
floor.
Cash. On this show, you can't be throwing out those claims you can't tease us without telling us.
We'll get to it. I promise.
Right.
So Chief Palmer, he makes it to the 78th floor, and he says, hey, we got a fire here across a couple floors. We could probably get it out. We put it out. He devised a plan and said, this is how we're going to put the fire out. And so, you know, these fires, they could have been put under control. And this is by the chief of the fire department, one of the fire departments. He understands how these things works, right? So the release was blocked. And then we have, and excuse my typo of claims there, but we have, like Angie was saying, right, where they said prior to the towers collapsing, you have a reporter from the BBC who says, hey, we're getting reports that the tower has collapsed 20 minutes before the tower collapsed.
Tower 7.
And she's literally, you can see the tower in the background
Behind her.
Yeah.
And there's also videos at the same time of the firefighters running out and saying that there are bombs in the lobby.
Yeah. Yep.
And described everything that happened there. And then
Yeah.
those videos were removed for quite some time. I saw them back recently a few years ago.
Yeah, you're spot on it. And we're actually really, really lucky at one of the breadcrumbs that was left by the firefighters. So there was a set of French brothers who were doing a documentary at the time of the process of a new recruit into the fire department in New York, and what their daily life looked like and what it was like for them. And so they were filming at the time that this happened. And so that's where a lot of our amazing footage comes from of the firefighters and other first responders.
I believe he caught one of the only videos, if not the only video, of the first plane hitting.
Yeah, one of the videos. Yep, exactly. So it's really interesting. Then you have there's a testimony by Willie Rodriguez, who was a janitor in the World Trade Center. He had been a janitor there for years and years and years. I think 20 plus years. His testimony is really interesting. I would encourage the viewers to go watch that. And he specifically talks about